And it led then to my next book, which was called The Least of Us, True Tales of American Hope in the Time of Fentanyl and Meth. And that is when I really the opioid story was focused mostly on Ohio, West Virginia, Tennessee, Indiana, Charlotte, North Carolina, various places like that.
Yeah.
It didn't, in my reporting, it didn't really focus a whole lot on Los Angeles. The Least of Us, because it involved fentanyl and methamphetamine, and began to report the story that a crucial element to our homeless problem and our mental illness problem, which people believe is somehow distant from this, is actually all involved with fentanyl, and especially with hyper-potent methamphetamine coming out of Mexico since really about 2010, 11, 12, right in there. That was one. And you could see this as you go through, look, any tent encampment, you can see people delusional. It's very different, that kind of homelessness today than it was 15 years ago.
Thank you.
Correct. It's not, before it was calmer maybe, or less aggressive and frenzied and less irrational. It was never fun, but it was very, very different.
People down on their luck, maybe a Vietnam vet, something like that, skewed a little bit older. Yeah. And then now you see, my wife and I used to joke about this. This is like 10 years ago, but it would be like, these are like attractive people. Like if they got cleaned up, like they're young, attractive people that you would, and it's a whole different, and the behavior is different.
Oh yeah. The tents, it really combined with bad policies in Los Angeles, if you ask me. So you have spread of meth and fentanyl. And the growth then, beginning in about 2010, 11, you begin to see the numbers really, really grow, as well as the number of deaths on the street begin to ratchet way up. At the same time, there's a couple of things that go on, but one of the main ones was there was this idea that people have a right to sleep in a tent on the sidewalk. And the tents became ways of imprisoning. You want to talk about mass incarceration? I always thought of the tents as like the source of mass incarceration. People were incarcerated, were in custody to their dope, and the tents made it very, very easy for you to use it, get it, because people all around in the tent encampments would get it, and very easy to develop a very high tolerance, meaning getting off of it was really scary to people because it was so, their tolerance was so high. And so you began to have, with the tents and the drugs, you began to have enormous amounts of exploitation, rape, pimping. And then of course you also had horrible public health problems. We now have typhus. Typhus is a disease originating in a time before modern sewer systems and flush toilets, and before antibacterial drugs.
Yeah.
And if you ask me, and I think I'm very convinced of this now. I had no idea about any of this until I began really reporting it and digging into it. But now it feels to me very much like all of these things combine to just create a very rooted, intransigent kind of homelessness that is also very threatening to people, and also creates, of course, the numbers of fires.
Just yesterday, there was literally a fire right on the bank of the LA River yesterday, created by a homeless encampment.
Fires, Skid Row. You could go along in Skid Row and you will see these kind of teepee-like burn marks because the tent burns right up against the building, right? There's these teepee-like burn marks, and it just, because the thing went up in flames. And what you also see is, and this is really the worst of it. I've covered a few of these on my newsletter. I write a newsletter called the Dreamland Newsletter on Substack. You can go to it at samquinones.substack.com. But is the problem that people face when they live next to an abandoned house or abandoned something, and they're overtaken by homeless people,
squatters,
frequently on meth.
Not even abandoned. Sometimes the houses that are being renovated in our neighborhood. This just a different fire. Different fire about 5 blocks east of here was a house being renovated And then there's a big fire, and the neighborhood neighbors are out filming, of course. And then somebody's like, "Oh yeah, I saw homeless squatters in there during the renovation."
And Hollywood has got a bunch of these. It's been just devastating, I think, and I'm stunned. Frankly, I have to say, I am stunned by the attitude of a lot of city officials. Well, not much we can do about this. Well, what are we going to do? I'm like, they colonized an abandoned property, and the one that was most outrageous in my view was that I wrote a story for my Substack, for my Dreamland newsletter, about a Salvadoran pastor who bought his house 2008 and renovated. He's also a contractor, so he made all these. His retirement, basically, that home was in the middle of Hollywood, East Hollywood, and then the guy next door let his house go vacant.
Yeah.
Within a few months, homeless squatters are moving in and out. They're screaming, they're yelling. They're homeless and on meth when they're screaming at 4 a.m. and fighting and all this kind of stuff. And this happens very, very often. And then, he's calling, neighbors are calling the city council office, the police, etc. Nobody does really much of anything. And the predictable happens. One Sunday, he's given a sermon down in his church in South Central, and 2:00, and the house next door catches fire. And then within 10 minutes, it's taken over his house, and his house, it goes up in flames. Juan Galicia is the man's name. It's just an absolute outrage. And also, a working class guy who did everything right, invested, improved, worked hard, and that's what happens. And so this is all connected, in my view, to a kind of a laissez-faire attitude with regards to homelessness.
Right.
The combination of tents and especially methamphetamine in a way that creates scary, unbridled kind of situations.
So the factors that exacerbated all this: stronger, more potent drugs. Right?
Yes, and the supplies, they're unending. It's not like a new wave of drugs that comes and goes. It's a new high tide. It's like you've got more drugs. Meth for women, like, it's free on the streets of LA, right? It's not, you don't pay for it. You pay other ways. But
wow.
It's the combination of saying, well, it's compassionate to let people live on the streets in a tent. Mm-hmm. When in fact, what that does is put them in a stationary place where they're reluctant to leave, but also makes them targets of whatever, pimps, drug dealers, and then also creates a kind of a community of addiction that can spread like under an old overpass.
Or in the river right here. Exactly.
Wherever you can find it, and it moves and it morphs and everything.
I just want to say this, just to get it on the record. We're here in Studio City, beautiful neighborhood, beautiful homes, great commercial district, but right there is the LA River. Specifically between Coldwater, then Whitsett, then Laurel, Lancashire, and my son's of age, riding the bike, all his friends and all this kind of stuff. People run, people walk. You go down in the river, and it's a river walk. One side's not a river walk, one is, but that's a whole different topic. But you see encampment after encampment after encampment,
right.
And it's, to your point, they become communities, and they become it's almost intractable at that point. Like,
the other thing is that people often say, well, this is a problem of affordable housing, and I've been speaking with people who are outreach workers, and the thing is, what they say, look, if it were the people who are lost their house because they have a surgery and rent, they can't afford both, they lost their job, whatever. Those are not people that we see. Those people solve their issues because they have not burned all their bridges with family.
Support system.
They have it all. Maybe they have to sleep in a garage or something for a bit, but there's a way. We don't often see them, is what they said, because they have other resources that they can rely on that are far better than ours. What they say is 90% of the people we see are on drugs. These two drugs create homelessness in two ways. One is simply by getting you addicted to them, and you cannot function on fentanyl. and you cannot function on the meth that's coming over from Mexico. It's so potent.
I heard a story yesterday. A guy was up for 11 days in a row. He was saying,
is the thing.
11 days.
Part of the mania of the psychosis is that you don't sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the drug, it's the violence and chaos of the street, and it's the non-sleeping. Plus, of course, lack of nutrition and a variety of other things. Of course, all of this kind of combined.
Right.
But the other way in which they help create homelessness is when you're on the street, when you're really on the street for whatever reason, and there are as many reasons as there are people who are homeless.
Of course.
Right? Once you begin using these drugs, which are so prevalent and so in your face and so cheap, that makes getting out of homelessness much more difficult than if you were not addicted. So these two ways are the way I believe these drugs collaborate in a sense to create and exacerbate homelessness, right?
So let me ask you, why are many of our elected officials unwilling to link the two? Because people, and I've had Nithya Raman in this chair, I've had Karen Bass in this chair, I've had multiple city council people, county supervisors, and they're so leery of linking, now I'm just a guy who observes stuff, but you're like, oh, homeless, drugs, it seems, but the official stance is no. It's not. They're not all on drugs. And again, you can't paint with a broad brush. But what is that hesitation to link it?
Outreach workers will tell you, the people who go into the encampments will say, no, 90% of people we see are on drugs. Now, did they start out on drugs? That's why who knows? But once you're on drugs and addicted to drugs, that's the problem you got to address.
Yeah.
Up to now, what the policy has been is a policy from the 1980s, which was, we'll give you a house. So take you from a tent where you're raving psychotic.
Yeah.
And out of your mind in various other ways, and very, very damaged in other ways. And we're just going to put you in a house.
Yeah.
And, that just, I'm sorry, that seems delusional to me. It seems like the whole idea, the whole approach that LA has taken is to say, we are going to apply policies from the 1980s and 90s to a time when fentanyl and meth have changed everything on the street. There's nothing really the same when it comes to illegal drugs, when those two drugs in that immense potency and they're just unrelenting supply. That's key. You're just never away from it. And so you have policies that have been originated in years and years ago, decades ago. And to me, they have just failed miserably, and worse, they not only have failed, they continue to fail, and they continue to require catastrophic amounts of money that is gone.
What a great term, catastrophic.
And it's unconscionable the amount of money that's been spent to very little avail, because I believe people are focusing on this problem without focusing. The real focus needs to be on fentanyl and meth, tents, that whole world. Getting people out of that world is where we need to go with this.
Perfect segue for the question I was going to ask.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's a Pandora's box, but Sam Quinones, you are in charge of fixing, of solving this problem.
Yeah.
What are the steps? What are the things that need to be? We know what's being done wrong, because whatever's being done is not working. I mean, that's just a fact. I see it with my own eyes in my own neighborhood. So what are different steps? What in your world would the steps be taken?
Sure. You're right. I'm a reporter.
Yeah.
However, I have spent a lot of time writing, interviewing, thinking about these things, and I believe that fentanyl and meth, as they change everything, one of the things they change is you cannot wait for people to be ready for treatment on the streets. They'll never be ready for treatment in the time it takes for meth to drive them mad, and then fentanyl to kill them. Meanwhile, they're creating all kinds of havoc in public health and public safety. So what we need to do is develop a policy and spaces. Now, there are places where this can happen, of arresting people for minor stuff. We stopped doing this. We thought, we're not going to arrest for a meth pipe.
Man.
No, you have to arrest for a meth pipe, but not because you want that person to go to prison for his 12th arrest for a meth
not
pipe.
punitive.
You want to get that person off the street. An arrest in this environment, fentanyl, meth, etc., tents, is a blessing. It's a blessing. The only place people begin to find readiness for treatment.
Right.
Readiness for treatment is very important. But where are you going to find? It's where you find it. You cannot find it in a tent, by the river or whatever. And so my feeling is we need to start arresting people for that as a pretext to get them off the street where they can sleep, where they can get nutrition, where they can get. This is the compassionate approach.
Right.
Leaving people on the street to die. I don't know how that became misinterpreted as compassion.
I was just going to ask you that.
Don't ask me how, man. I have no idea.
Did it twist where compassion?
Yeah, great. I mean, I think that's a long story. Probably don't have to. But the other thing then, and this is what I wrote about in The Least of Us. Yeah. We need to rethink jail. We need to rethink custody as a place where people can begin recovery. Yeah. It's been a place. I have interviewed so many people who have said the best day of my life was when I got arrested. I'd be dead otherwise. We need to take advantage of that great moment that happens in so many addicts' lives when they're in jail. Their baby mama won't take the call. Mom is the only family member who'll ever have anything to do with them. And they're like, what have I done? And at that moment, historically, we've just put them in a general population where it's more chaos. What we need is then to develop a continuum of care that starts in jail, starts with an arrest, turns jail into a place of recovery, very much like a treatment center on the outside, except you can't leave when the drugs tell you that you must. It's a blessing to be in jail. And so then after that, we prepare them. This is what jails right now are doing. This is not like a fantasy. This is not a utopia. This is what jails are actually preparing them to leave, meaning a whole continuum of care on the outside that starts with drug court, enforcing accountability and this kind of thing, but then also other like job placement, tattoo removal, driver's license recovery. But it all starts with jail and periods, months, maybe many months of enforced sobriety so that once people have had a chance to sleep, not use meth every day, be away from the violence and the chaos and the lethal temperatures and whatever else, all of a sudden those people who refuse treatment, that's what outreach workers find. 90% of the people they talk to refuse treatment. Just shows you how badly these drugs thwart our basic instinct for survival. In jail, once they have this time, healing time, quiet, time for sleep, time for rejuvenation, then all of a sudden, I'm ready for treatment now. See, that's the thing. You got to find a place where they can find that readiness.
Right.
And so I wrote a lot about this in The Least of Us. I wrote about a jail in a county across from the river from Cincinnati, Kenton County, where they are doing just this. And I think other jails are experimenting with these ideas.
Right.